In this video, I'll explain a Thailand drama romance film called Love You My Arrogance. The film begins by showing a famous YouTuber named Felix. He has the special power of hearing other people's thoughts. That day, he stood in front of the citizens and all their thoughts could be heard by Felix. This bothered him as it caused a loud ringing in his ears. Felix then screamed because he couldn't stand the pain and rushed out of the place. He preferred to be alone in a quiet place. Because of this, he is often dubbed as the Arrogance by subscribers of his YouTube channel and also his haters. The day before, Felix was seen relaxing on the edge of the dam with his cameraman and his best friend, a man named Taeyang. They planned to visit a village not far from the dam. As one of Felix's closest people, Taeyang learns about Felix's special powers. So therefore, he created several social media pages, such as Facebook and YouTube, so that Felix could work without meeting many people. However, after having many fans and subscribers, Felix became lazy to create content and upload videos. That's what made Taeyang feel bad for him. But Taeyang never expressed his annoyance to Felix because without having to say it, he could also figure it out by reading his mind. On the way to the village in question, Felix and Taeyang's car was stopped by a fat, cute-mouthed man named Jane who begged to be given a ride to the same village which they were going to. However, Felix later heard Jane's thoughts calling him an arrogant YouTuber. Not long after, a beautiful woman named Ellen appears next to Jane and looks surprised to see a famous YouTuber like him in such a remote place. Even though she had time to admire Felix's good looks, Ellen immediately felt annoyed because Felix was not a friendly person at all and his attitude was very annoying when Felix chose not to give them a ride and just drove away in his car. Felix and Taeyang finally arrive at their intended village and rush to their best friend's house, a man named Nadio. The village is Nadio's hometown and Felix intends to create content there. Not long after, there was a scream of a woman who looked very surprised to see Felix's presence in a remote village like this. The woman is Brownie, Nadio's junior in college who is researching her college assignments in the village. Brownie is a huge Felix's fan. That's why she was so hysterical seeing him in front of her. Not long after, Ellen and Jane arrived in a motorcycle cart belonging to one of the villagers who kindly gave them a ride. Even though neither of them said a word, Felix and Ellen looked at each other cynically, as if they didn't like each other's presence. Felix and Taeyang then discussed with Nadio about their content in the village. Felix asked Nadio to be the host of the show accompanying him. He also requested that they film with only 5 people in attendance. Felix and his 2 friends meet up with Jane and Ellen in the evening. Just like Nadio, Jane is a native of the village. The man works as Ellen's manager, while Ellen works as a writer. Seeing Felix being arrogant, Ellen also tried to advise him not to be arrogant to other people, including his fans, because he has a profession as a YouTuber and also a writer who really needs support from fans. However, Felix responds to Ellen sarcastically and asks her not to meddle in his business.
มันก็เรื่องของฉัน
The next day, Felix and the others started filming, where they would document the activities of the villagers. Felix was irritated that the shooting was attended by more than 5 people, which was not what he had requested. Taeyang further exacerbates the situation, who deliberately proposes Felix as a participant in the activity. Felix, who couldn't help but come forward, suddenly felt nervous and had a headache from hearing many people's thoughts at once. He screamed in frustration, then ran away from the place. Ellen, who was worried, saw Felix, who looked as if he had a panic attack, then went after him. When they finally meet and are alone in that place, Felix realizes that there is something odd about Ellen, namely that he can't hear Ellen's thoughts at all, because he doesn't know Ellen's thoughts. Felix says openly that Ellen's head is empty, infuriating Ellen. This was Felix's first time meeting someone whose thoughts he couldn't figure out. That's what makes Ellen different from the others. Ellen, who was still confused by Felix's attitude, then grabbed his 2 hands and held them for a moment. She then looked at Felix with a concerned expression before finally rushing away from him without saying a word. In the evening, Felix borrows Nadio's bicycle and intends to go for a walk. However, just outside Nadio's fence, he met 2 young men who had borrowed a lighter from him. Felix's expression then turned serious when he heard the thoughts of the 2 young men planning to carry out a robbery in the village tomorrow night. The next morning, Felix reports to Nadio and Taeyang what he heard about the robbery plot. The 3 of them then started to patrol the village entrance by stopping the motorbike riders who were considered quite suspicious, but could not find the 2 young men. On the other hand, Jane and Ellen watched what Felix and his friends were doing from a distance. Not long after, 2 young motorcycle riders approached Ellen and Jane, who were sitting relaxed under a tree, where one of the youths tried to seduce Ellen by asking for her phone number. But because Ellen refused, the two young men got annoyed and confronted Ellen and Jane when they were about to leave. When they tried to attack Ellen, Jane stepped forward and knocked one of them out. Not far from there, Felix and Nadio were seen walking towards them like heroes trying to save a beautiful girl. However, they walked too slowly, so it was Jane who finally defeated the young delinquents with the help of Ellen. Felix then tells Nadio that it was the two delinquents he met last night, who had an evil plan to carry out a robbery. Nadio then chased the delinquent youths away and threatened to report them to the police if they dared to come to the village again. After that, Ellen followed Felix, who was cycling alone, and thanked him for helping to get rid of the bad boys from the village. Ellen, who lost her balance, suddenly fell off her bicycle, and Felix swiftly helped her, making Ellen think that Felix was actually a good man. Not long after, Taeyang and Brownie came after Felix, or Brownie, who didn't seem to like Ellen and Felix's closeness, then asked if she liked Felix. Ellen quickly said she didn't like Felix, and Brownie looked relieved. In the evening, Ellen gets a new inspiration for her story, where Jane looks impatient to read Ellen's prompt, but she asks him to be patient until the story is finished. The next day, Jane and Brownie got into an argument in the middle of the shooting process. Felix then reprimanded Brownie for screaming while he was filming. Even though Brownie was screaming in her heart at that time, which made Ellen and the others feel surprised to see Felix's attitude. Not long after, Felix again reprimanded Jane and Brownie, who had a fight. Even though the argument was only going on in their minds, Felix could still hear everything, so Nadio took Jane and Brownie away from there so as not to disturb Felix, who was filming. After filming, Ellen followed Felix to ask him how to become a YouTuber, but Felix refused and told her to Google it. Ellen then invites Felix to be friends, but Felix doesn't want to. Taeyang, who saw Felix and Ellen's behavior, couldn't help but laugh. Ellen continued to follow Felix until he felt embarrassed and wanted to run away. But then, Felix ran somewhere where he found a woman who had fallen off her bicycle. The woman was mute and could not scream for help, but Felix could hear her thoughts from a distance, so he rushed to her aid. Ellen wonders if Felix knows sign language. With all the oddities that Felix shows, Ellen also thinks that there is something that Felix is keeping from everyone. Ellen then asks Jane for help to find out all about Felix because she plans to write a story about the arrogant YouTuber. Moreover, Ellen is sure that Felix has a big secret that others have always hidden. Meanwhile, at Nadio's house, Taeyang and Brownie get into an argument, but Nadio, who sees it, thinks they will become lovers. Before going to bed, Taeyang prays that the videos they upload will get a good response and can reach 1 million views to earn money. After posting a notification about a soon-to-be video, Taeyang and Felix read various bad comments about Felix being known to be arrogant. Felix looks gloomy reading it, but he then says he doesn't care because what matters to him is Taeyang, who is always by his side. The next day, Taeyang tells Nadio that Felix can't hear Ellen's thoughts, which is of course very strange. After Felix's latest video content was uploaded to his YouTube channel, various reactions from his subscribers flooded the comments column, where not a few of them wrote bad comments about Felix's famous arrogant personality. Brownie, who saw one of the malicious comments, then challenged the commentator, who is an anti-fan, to come personally to the village and meet Felix in person. Having received the challenge, the anti-fan immediately accepted it and rushed there in hopes of exposing more of Felix's ugliness to the public realm. On the following day, the anti-fan challenged by Brownie finally really came. The anti-fan was a man named Tong who came there to keep an eye on Felix and expose his ugliness to the public. Tong was once a huge Felix fan, but Felix insulted him 2 years ago and threw away his gift. Since then, Tong has hated Felix and has become his anti-fan who always writes bad comments on his social media pages. Tong's presence nearby made Felix unable to focus on filming because he always heard his bad thoughts about him. Brownie, feeling guilty, tries to apologize to Felix for causing trouble by challenging his anti-fan to come. An annoyed Felix then yells at Brownie until she cries and asks her to stay away from him. Felix's rather rude behavior is then recorded by Tong, who will spread his bad behavior to his fans so that they stop falling for the arrogant man. Ellen, who saw this, did not just stay silent. She then goes to Tong and tells him why Felix kicked and insulted him. At that time, Tong liked Felix so much that he neglected his studies at school. Tong's parents then asked Felix to convince Tong to focus on studying, so Felix deliberately kicked and insulted Tong so that he would stop idolizing him and focus on studying as his parents wanted him to. Even though Felix must be hated by Tong, he is forced to do that so that Tong doesn't destroy his parents' hopes and also his future. Helen then held Tong's hand and said if he continued to act as an anti-fan, then he would destroy people who were considerate and kind to him. After that, Ellen meets Felix and reveals that she knows about his special powers. Ellen grumbles that Felix is always venting his frustration over his superiority on others. Felix was surprised and asked how Ellen knew about his powers. But suddenly he heard someone's thoughts from a distance and asked Ellen to pull over because she was in the middle of the road. Because Ellen was nagging, Felix grabbed her before several motorcyclists hit her at high speed. Felix had a few abrasions, but Ellen was rescued, which was a relief. After thanking him, Ellen suggested that Felix use his power to help others. Ellen also said that she knew a woman who could know someone else's past just by touching that person, which made her afraid to be close to other people. Tong, who finally found out that everything was said was the truth, then went to Felix and apologized to him. When Felix finds out that Ellen told Tong all of this, he wonders how Ellen got to know all this. Felix then approaches Ellen, trying to find out everything about the woman, unable to hear Ellen's thoughts. Felix teased her by bringing their faces closer together, making Ellen feel embarrassed and her heart skipped a beat. But then Felix finally finds out that Ellen has been trying to get close to him because she made him the subject of a new story she was about to write. Felix immediately felt sad and disappointed because it turned out that Ellen was the same as the people who had been trying to approach him for the sake of profit. He was also annoyed because he couldn't know Ellen's thoughts, so he was fooled by Ellen's attitude, which he thought was only pretending to care and understand him. 2 months later, Felix and Tang are now in another village for their newest content. Felix no longer meets and relates to Ellen, but even so, he looked flustered the entire time. Tang then advises Felix to follow his heart and be honest about his feelings for Ellen, but Felix insists that he only needs Tang as his friend and always by his side. Until one day, Tang tried to advise Felix to be more gentle with other people, including fans like Brownie. However, Felix did not accept Tang's advice and asked him to leave when Tang was tired of accompanying him. An annoyed Tang then scolds Felix and actually leaves him. Felix then returns to camp where he sees Tang on a video call with Nadio and talking about him. He suddenly remembered Nadio's words, saying that Tang would not leave Felix because he was very worried about him. Felix realized his mistake and apologized to Tang. They both eventually made up and became friends again. That evening, Ellen and Brownie come to apologize to Felix. Ellen tries to apologize and explain everything to him, but he responds coldly and arrogantly. After an incident in the forest, which Tang, Helen, and Brownie had planned, Felix finally realizes how important Ellen is in his life and how much he worries about her when left alone. After that, Ellen and Felix made up and their relationship became closer. Not only that, Felix finally forgave Brownie and no longer sees her as a fan, but as a friend. On the other hand, Tang and Brownie's relationship grew closer, and as Nadio had predicted, they eventually became lovers. Felix then tells Ellen that the person who has the power to know of someone's past just by touching is Ellen herself. However, Ellen denies this by saying that if she has that power, then she doesn't have to bother finding out all about Felix. However, Felix thought that Ellen had experienced something like him because they both had special powers. When their relationship grew closer and Felix asked Ellen to be his girlfriend, she then refused and deliberately acted arrogantly to repay Felix's attitude towards her. However, Felix knows that Ellen will definitely be willing to be his girlfriend someday, and he will continue to strive for Ellen's love. Through this film, we are shown someone who has special powers and tries to do good using that power, even though many people misunderstand him and call him arrogant. However, you don't need superpowers to start caring and helping others. Attention and actions that may seem trivial will mean a lot to people who need help. And the film ended.